Good evening. It is the American Scouser TV Thursday night podcast, or as the cool kids are calling it, ASTV. That's what we say. Us cool ones, not those Monday people.
How much did that shirt cost?
$16, literally $16 plus the print. Amazon is fantastic for stuff like that. I mean, to be fair, like there was probably 10 kids whipped to make it for me, but you know, it's for the cause. We don't have Jamie this week. Jamie has done the fantastic thing of repopulating the Liverpool fan base, and he's become a dad, so he's not with us this week, and hopefully we'll hear stories about that next week. So that means now 60-second news, but we're joined by the as ever handsome and stylish David. How are you, David?
Good. How you doing?
Not too bad. I've got a t-shirt that kids were whipped to make. I'm a happy man. Who says I had a heart? But we've a positive show to talk about. It was the same this morning for the Thursday for the morning coffee show. Ajax against Liverpool, nice win, good performance, professional performance for once, we were able to say, and a couple of little surprises there at the end with the subs and stuff like that. Did you see the game? And if you did, what did you think of it?
I thought it was good. I did see it. I thought Ajax actually started really well. We just did a good job of absorbing all that pressure and finding a way through, kind of like what the performances you were used to 2-3 years ago, where even when we were put under pressure, you never felt too panicked. They only had a couple of really, really good chances, I would say. And then the rest of the time we were, I think pretty good. There was little moments where I thought this is looking kind of familiar, but then that assist Hendo has opens the game right up, right? And so after that, it was completely different.
We'll go into detail on sections of the game, but that assist was something else. It's not really something you think of Jordan Henderson, of all players, doing, but an outside of the right curled pass right into Salah's feet. It was a little bit of magic that we've missed for a long while, wasn't it?
Yeah, my phone blew up immediately with one of my buddies saying, "Oh, you only pass this sideways." I thought, sideways or backwards.
Well, technically, he did pass it sideways. It was just very artfully.
Yeah, he did. But I think it is funny you say that, because you don't normally associate like an outside of the boot sort of open up the game pass with Jordan Henderson, but it just shows that he has it in the tank. And I think if we can get him in peak form, like really performing like he was at the end of 18-19. I don't know if you remember when he scored against Southampton, and every week he was just putting in a killer performance. If we can get him back on that kind of pattern, I think the rest of the team will follow. He's still the captain for a reason. And, if he's feeling good in the locker rooms, he's lifting up the locker room, I think it's just going to help us a tremendous amount.
I think as well, I mean, it's funny you say that about, his captaincy, because I remember him kind of being mocked as the person that's going to take over from Steven Gerrard when Steven Gerrard was still playing and coming to the end of his time at Liverpool. But he has actually come out as probably one of our best captains in the post-1990 era, really, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's won everything that a club footballer can win. The only thing he hasn't won is a World Cup or a Euros, really.
And he's never going to do it because he's English.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to happen. But I mean, what he's achieved, I think, is incredible. And he was a central character in all of it. He really brought that locker room together and made it what it is. So I think, to be honest with you, I think you have to call him. And there's some people who will say, wow, Gerrard, and it's blasphemy to say it, but I think Jordan Henderson's probably the best captain that we've had since 1990. I mean, certainly the most successful, right?
So I actually agree with you. For all the talent, I think on talent levels, Gerrard outshines Jordan Henderson.
Oh, every day.
Pure talent, but in terms of dragging the team to where we as supporters wanted to be, I think Jordan Henderson definitely has done a better job. And probably because the focus wasn't on him a lot of the time, whereas with Gerrard, he was often the best player on our team. Mm-hmm. Up till, when Suarez came there. But for Jordan Henderson, he was never the best player on the team. No. And so it probably allowed him to lead a lot more effectively than Gerrard. But it's good to see that he gets that reverence now that he didn't get maybe 8 to 10 years ago at this point, 8 to 9 years ago, wherever it was that he joined us. But in terms of the team itself, as you say, Ajax had a good spell. I think it was about maybe the first 25, 30 minutes. But we weren't terribly bad at that point. It seemed like more that Ajax were really up for it, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were playing for their any hope, right? It's like if they had any hope of getting out of the group, they had to win this game. And they looked like a team that had their backs against the wall in that first 35 minutes. I just thought we did a great job of absorbing that, not letting the atmosphere. The first 30 minutes had a really solid atmosphere from the crowd. Didn't let that get to them. And just a really good performance across the lineup, I think. I can't think of anybody that really made any mistakes or that was, costly to us. And it was just that is a good team, and they were up for that moment.
I thought like a standout, and I want to get to this when we talk more tactically, but I thought a standout performer was Bobby Firmino, not because of the magic that we associate with Bobby Firmino, but he seemed to play an almost different role like than we're used to. Whereas, we always think of him as the forward that drops in, but he played almost like a central midfielder in that game, didn't he?
Yeah, and actually, it's a role that it's funny that you said Bobby, because I was actually going to say the same thing. But you remember like 18, 19, 19, 20 for a while, he was doing that a lot, where he was essentially Mo and Mane were coming in around him, and he was just kind of dropping deep, and he was actually our best defensive player during that period of time. He kind of looked like that again. And if he can look like that on a consistent basis, we're going to get back to winning a lot of games, I think. I felt really good about that. Like, seeing Bobby get back to his form this season is a huge relief. Couldn't be better timed.
I think as well, there was I'm a bit of a tactical historian. I like to read all those, the books about the old tactics and stuff like that. And there was a thing that always impressed me about Norway in the 1990s when they had that fantastic team. They had a Jostein Flo, who was like a 6'10", whatever it was. Those big Norwegians usually are. But they played him out on the right wing, usually against the smaller fullback. So when he got the ball, he'd always win that battle. It seemed to me yesterday at points that Nunes was actually the left winger. And Bobby was filling in that space, that it seemed like something that once we got it going, Ajax couldn't cope with. If that was a deliberate thing, do you think that's a clue to how we're going to be playing coming up in the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, maybe. We talked about it, I think, the episode before last, about how, we had signed Darwin to be a center forward, right? But he was popping up in all these other parts of the pitch. And I think that is probably going to be more... We're going to really see his versatility shine through in the next couple of weeks, or not in the next couple of years. But I think this season we'll see more of him in those wide areas than we thought, for sure.
For us, we talked about the Rangers game and how the same thing again. Rangers came out pumped in that game for the first 20 minutes or so and looked like they wanted. As he said, they needed the points and they wanted to get something out of it. And we didn't crumble. I was the same here. Is this now a plan, do you think, for Liverpool in the Champions League this year? Because it seems now to happen regularly where we're going to absorb the first, almost the reverse of how we used to play. We're going to absorb the blitzkrieg, and then once you tire yourself out, we're going to come after you with a vengeance.
Maybe. I think it's a bad idea, to be honest. I think we'll be ready for that. Also, I think we do better when teams are aggressive and come at us. So, I think that they're actually playing into our hands, because I think at where we're at right now, Liverpool are happy to let you have the ball at times. We'd rather counter. We'd rather have somebody that's not going to just sit deep in their own box. And Champions League teams aren't really going to do that. So, that's why I think it's possible that, no matter how bad the league season goes, it's entirely possible that we win a Champions League. So this whole thing kind of plays right into our hands.
There was, for me, as I love pressing teams. I'm an Ireland fan. I grew up in the Jack Charlton era, which is one of the very first pure pressing teams. But one of the things about being a counter-pressing team is the other team has to have the ball in the first place in order for you to counter-press. It seems like for the first half of the season, we've spent a lot of time with the ball, which probably doesn't play to our strengths as much as we have those creative players. And now it seems we're quite prepared to go, you have it, and let's see what you can do with it. And now we're going to hurt you. That's almost back to the original template, almost, if you will, the original plan for Klopp, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit more of that heavy metal style, right? Like, we don't need to control the game. And the truth is, for controlling the game, I'm not sure that we have we don't consistently, I would say, have the personnel to break teams down like that are going to play the way Forest did in that second half, right? It's just going to be really, really difficult for us all the time to do that. You need, I'd say, like a Phil Coutinho type. We don't necessarily have that. And I looked at that Forest game and I thought Fabinho's essentially rendered useless in this situation, right? Because he kind of doesn't have to do any of the usual bits that he does, and he's not exactly creative enough to help us break down that low block. So when teams come at us, like, he played brilliant in the City game. Well, it was a different type of game, right? And he plays well again today or yesterday. So I think for us, it's let it happen. Let the ball go. We don't have to have it the whole time. Defend, be strong in defense, break fast, catch them off balance, running back at their own goal. I like that as a recipe for more goals for Mo Salah and Darwin Núñez.
I know there's a quote, but I can't remember whether it came after the game or at some point between games, where Klopp was talking about going back to basics and the coaching staff sitting down and having a look at things. But that really is the back to basics thing, isn't it? It's not the basics of the game. It's not the fundamentals. It's literally, what did we do right 4 years ago that we're not doing right now? And it seems almost like the penny dropped that, we have too much of the ball. As much as we like Liverpool to pass, it's not our game, really, is it?
Yeah. I think it's good to be able to do that, right? So let's say you take a 2-0 lead in the first half. Sometimes you just want to pass it around and make sure that nothing happens. I'm fine with that. But at the same time, when we were at our best, we were always going to out-hustle you at whatever you did best. So, Villa comes into the place and they're going to play this counter-attacking style. It's like, no, you're going to have enough of the ball that we're going to out counter-attack you essentially and kill you with your own style. We were almost like chameleons, I would say, that 18-19 season in particular. Could beat you any way that we wanted. And I think lately we resorted to try to control the game. But it's like Trevor just put in the chat, possession for his possession's sake never does us any good. And that's what we've been doing for a while, is possessing it just to control the game. But we lose control of the game in one instant. It only takes one moment for them to score a goal. And we've seen it time and time again. So I'd rather just give up the ball, play it straight up, make them play it straight up, essentially. And we're going to win a lot more often.
I mentioned this either last week or the week before, and that at times this season we've almost looked like a Brendan Rodgers team with the ball, in that it looks pretty and the triangles are nice and the ball moves well, but it doesn't go where it's going to hurt the other team. And for us, we kind of really need different qualities to that kind of game. We're not really Manchester City, are we? We're a team that really needs to be playing at a high speed and not at that low controlling pace.
Yeah, for all the comparisons between us and City, and it's fair enough. We play a similar shape most of the time, and the both of us have world-class talent, so it's kind of inevitable, right, that sometimes people are going to make comparisons. But we're very different when we're at our best, and I think we're seeing that more than ever right now. We're just getting back to feeling like we're at our best, and look at how much different we are than they are. Like you said, they can play at that low intent, that low sort of speed, be very technical, and carve out chances out of, take 27 passes to do it. We, at times, are able to do that. I think we do that best against teams that play. So I think for us, I'd rather score with 2 passes than 27. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's when we're more effective.
There's I can't never remember whether it's the coach I actually knew or whether it's something I read, but it was, the phrase was the best play in soccer is one pass, one goal. Literally, you get the ball, you move it, and then you score. But you don't need anything more than that. And it seems that we've been getting that backwards for a lot of this season. And it's almost like it's clicked now that we need different kinds of qualities. Hang on. It appears we have a special guest coming on who has an opinion on the kinds of qualities. Brendan, is that you there?
You have to have character and intensity of pressing.
Brendan,
the man says it. The man said it. That's exactly what you need. We need character and intensity of pressing. But we do actually need that. Not the character part so much, but definitely that pressing game is the backbone of everything that makes us successful, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it goes beyond just pressing, right? Like, I know that everybody's angry about the book, Pep's book, but he talked about as part of that, and then as part of one of the interviews that I saw, he was doing with the Coach's Voice. If you're not following that on Instagram, it's a pretty cool account. Pep did an interview on there, and one of the things he was talking about was it's not like there's so many teams that press now, but where we make it up is in the chase. So the last 5 yards between your man and you when he's got the ball is the key period of time, and you have to close that gap like at an incredible rate. And he talks about kind of how they worked on that, and that is one of the keys that make us successful. Pressing always was, and now it's really this. They've taken it to this, I think, extra intensity at times. The issue is when you've got a bunch of new players in. Do they understand the triggers of when to go? Do they understand like where to be so that other players can press comfortably and in kind of in sync? So that's like one of those things where we're just going to get better at it now. But I think that we did struggle with it in the early portion of the season. I think we saw at times different players maybe didn't quite know where to be. Harvey, as good as he's played, was doing, I think, maybe a little extra running than he needed to. And I think the last couple of performances, like Rangers and this, you've seen a much more controlled Harvey Elliott, but it's also resulted in him getting goals.
For me, going back to like all the coaching courses, etc., that I did, I was I loved the pressing game, and I studied it intensively. And the thing that I always get, like as you say, everybody presses or at least says they press. Like just for example, Brendan Rodgers always talks about his team's pressing. But the thing about pressing is you need compactness as well. You can't just send one player out to the ball. You need 3 or 4 behind him to cover that player in case they get beat, which we were so good at. Like we literally hunted in packs, as the Dutch used to say, and we kind of lost that a little bit recently. And yesterday it was so good to see that we got back to that tightness between the lines. And as he said, it freed up players like Harvey Elliott and Darwin Núñez, I think, who also had a problem with the lines and the distances. They suddenly became better attackers because of it, didn't they?
Yeah, and I was just about to say the same thing. I think at the beginning of the season, you were seeing Darwin. He really struggled. I don't think he knew where to be. He didn't know when to go, when to stick. He was kind of just a little off on a lot of different occasions. And then that combined with the fact that the 3 of them across the front 3 were so far apart, we were having all these different issues with defending from the front and getting into the attacking positions that we needed to get into. And it's definitely improved these last couple of weeks. I think we're finally starting to get back to that a little bit. Part of it may just be like burnout easing because, well, Robbo had that little extended rest with the injury. And since he's come back, I think he's looked fantastic again, whereas he was looking a little burnt out before he went. James Milner giving Trent Alexander-Arnold a couple games of rest, I think, has also done wonders for him. Jordan Henderson looks pretty fresh. It's all kind of picking back up now. Everybody's snapping out of that malaise a little bit, I think, from the summer. So this is, if they can get that back, we're going to start to see more of the performances that we're used to from this team.
Now, just to kind of look a bit more tactically at it, we talked about Núñez's role and Bobby becoming a midfielder again almost. And the eye test as I watched the game was telling me certain things in terms of how we were packing the midfield. But looking at the average positions, I actually confirmed it. If we look at that's almost a 2-6-2 we're playing there. That's literally the perfect pressing shape, isn't it?
It really is. Look at that diamond shape at the back where it gets more narrow, and then just the way that it's clogging up the midfield. That's actually, we would do well to keep this.
I mean, look, we've doubled up in the fullback areas. The Bobby dropping in meant that Fabinho wasn't isolated in there. Elliot and Trent Alexander seem to have a good rapport. Robertson and Henderson was always good at supporting the fullbacks, and then that nice little balance up front. I mean, it's not a usual formation, but as you say, maybe it's something we should keep for a lot longer than just one game.
I think one of the reasons our fullbacks have been so successful, I mean, we talked about it before, but why are they leading the league in assists every year? Well, it's because their midfielders do a lot of that graft work at the back for them and cover for them when they're going forward. And we were seeing at the beginning of the season, like Harvey's position was much further up the pitch. Even Henderson's position was much further up the pitch. And then so now as Trent would leave that space to go forward, there's nothing behind him. There's no help. It's just Fabinho kind of lingering in the middle or trying to pick up pieces where he can, and your two center backs. So I think as we see that maturity from Harvey that we were talking about, he's been a much more controlled game, doing a lot less running. I mean, and I might be wrong. He maybe has covered more distance, but I would venture a guess that so has Trent then. So it's kind of been like an equal. They both have done more, but they're both kind of interchanging better. Whatever it is, I just think is they have to work in pairs because, like you said, they have to hunt in packs. And the wide areas are an area where you have to kind of work together in this system with those wide midfielders and your fullbacks.
We talked briefly about Elliot. As you say, it was a very mature performance, and he got a goal for it. But thankfully, this time the goal had like zero, what if kind of about. It was a fantastic goal, wasn't it?
Love to see somebody banging into the top of the net, man. So that was, he put it home emphatically, and then that was the game. I almost thought to myself, should I click on over and see if Atletico Madrid really gets knocked out? But I couldn't do it. I had to see it. I don't care about Diego Simeone.
But for us, Elliot's performance was as you say, mature. It was a composed performance. And I think we said either last week or I said during the morning coffees, it was last week. Yeah, we've so many young players that have come through that we've all pinned our hopes on, and some that maybe had more outward flash talent than Harvey Elliott. But Harvey Elliott seems to have the brain for it, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that Klopp's putting him in midfield tells you all you need to know. I thought for sure that he was going to be a wide attacker. That was kind of going to be probably the first 5 years of his career. And then we'll see if he can make it as a number 10 or something like that. But he's completely just upended that notion and shown that he can play wherever you put him. To play in Klopp's midfield is incredibly difficult, right? He asks you to do a ton of work. It's a lot of difficult work. You're going to have to do defending. You're going to have to attack. You're going to have to be a great passer. There's a lot of different pieces to it. And we've seen the effect it has on some players' bodies, right? Oxlade-Chamberlain has never been able to stay healthy, even from the first year that we signed him, right? Naby, same thing. And how many players over the years have kind of come and gone? Genie, I think we essentially ran into the ground. So it's a difficult ask on a player's body to play in that system. But you can, we were talking about with his maturity in this last performance, I'm sitting here thinking about what I just said, and I'm thinking, I bet he did more running, but it seemed like less. Because before it was almost like you felt every step that he took. Because it looked exhausting. And yesterday didn't look exhausting. But we were better and probably did more running and had a higher intensity than what he had at the beginning of the season. It just didn't look like it because he wasn't doing it alone, or he wasn't wandering off on his own kind of in the attack.
It was more focused running almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, moving on from Elliott and his composed performance, would it be fair to say that, if not the best, it was certainly top 3 best performances from Núñez yesterday?
Oh yeah, I think it's just nice because for all the criticism that he's taken, and it's a lot of it is just so short-sighted. Like, he's been here for 2 months. He's 23 years old. Like, give the kid a break, let him settle in a little bit. But I think we're starting to see the quality of the player that we signed. Right, this is why he cost that much. I mean, that header yesterday, the way he fights through, he's got to get one guy literally hanging off of him, and another guy trying to grab at him. He drags them both to the ball and heads it in. It was, it's an absolute beast of a move. You're seeing that he can play in wide areas. You're seeing that he can strike the ball really well. It's just going to get better, I think, from him as we go. I think this is the player that we thought we were going to get. It's just he's coming into a new system. He doesn't understand the coach. He doesn't understand anything he says. So he's having to figure it out. But he's obviously an intelligent footballer. I love the chaos that he causes. I think it's going to fit really well with that return to that style of football that we were just talking about. That's the kind of player that you want, is kind of comfortable in chaos.
I mean, it's funny that you say comfortable in chaos there, because it seemed to me, we've talked, myself, yourself, and Jamie, we've talked endlessly about Núñez getting in sync with the system and gelling with the rest of the players. Yesterday's performance seemed like it was a really confident performance. He knew where he was supposed to be for the most part, and then that allowed him to know when he didn't have to be there, and then he could go and play in other areas to help out when needed, instead of chasing the ball around or almost sometimes making aimless runs that nobody was recognizing. It literally seemed like, do you know that thing of you have to know the rules to break the rules? He seemed really confident in what he was doing yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought, was it, so he scores off the corner, but I'm pretty sure, wasn't it him that stole the ball and shot it for the corner to win the corner?
Yeah.
And it was in that moment I thought he was in the perfect position. He pounced when he needed to. And then you can just see how it doesn't take him long to be a threat on goal. He only needs a couple of touches, and then there it is. So I think that says it all in terms of his comfort level and where he's getting to, in terms of, in terms of his comfort level.
I think, look, these are his touches for the game. I mean, he's all over the field, but it didn't seem like he was lost at any point. This is literally seems like he understood where he was.
like where your center back normally would be. And there was actually one point in the game where the announcer said, "What is he doing there?"
Yeah.
And I kind of laughed because it was true. Like it was very early on in there. They had just gotten the ball to that point in the pitch, and he's intercepting a pass and running up the field. And it was kind of like, well, yeah, no, why was he there? He shouldn't have been that deep that fast, right?
Yeah.
That speaks to his intuition and his understanding of the game and where he's getting to, like we said, with the understanding of the system.
I have to admit, when I saw that happen, and I thought it was Virgil van Dijk. I literally thought Van Dijk had intercepted the ball, and we were going to see a classic Van Dijk moment. And then it was like, is that Darwin Núñez? What's he doing in the box?
Yeah, you're like, why?
I mean, if he had scored from that would have been like goal of the season in the Champions League right there. Easily.
Oh, right. He just took off.
Yeah. But yeah, a fantastic performance from him. And do you think maybe it was apart from the injury, maybe taking him off at a high point was probably good for his confidence at the 60th minute?
Yeah, and then with the thigh strain, no need to push it, right? Just take it. It's kind of like in that situation, even as a player, you can understand he's protecting you, and I think it's just a good thing. Like, it'll be fine for his confidence. It's not going to hurt him that he was taken off. He'll understand what the purpose of that is, and that he's going to need to put in a performance against Leeds on Saturday.
I mean, he looked fairly happy in the way that all players can only look a bit happy when they come off the field after a good performance. But he did fantastically well. What did you think of the subs? I mean, we're looking at Bajcetic, and we're looking at Carvalho, and we're looking at Curtis Jones to step up along the same lines as Harvey Elliott. It wasn't probably the game where you're going to see their best, because I think it was almost a control the game let's just see it out kind of a deal. But how did you see their contributions?
Well, for Fabio right now, I think every minute is valuable. He's not always where he needs to be. He's not maybe always looking the sharpest, but I think there's an incredible player in there. He's got a ton of talent, fantastic touch. I don't care if he plays in midfield or in attack. I personally kind of would rather him play in attack, but either way, I think every minute counts for him. It's just more experience and us inching closer to unleashing his full potential. Is it Basitic?
I don't know. There's a J in it, so I always make that a zzz sound when I say it.
Yeah. I think he shows a lot of really good intuitive sense. Like he popped up in a couple of positions where you'd want a number 6 to pop up right when he needed to be there and did the right thing with the ball once he won it. That happened on a couple of occasions, and I felt like, okay, there's a player in there. Klopp's got a pretty good history of working with young players. This kid at this point has absolutely no pressure on him. He's just whatever we get out of him is whatever we get out of him. I wouldn't be surprised if of course, he's going to play in the cups, and he may put in a performance that we all talk about before the end of the winter, before the end of the League Cup campaign. So I felt really good about his contribution. And then who was the third one?
Curtis Jones.
Yeah, well, I think just getting him on the pitch is good, right? Yeah. We've got to get Curtis minutes because he's got to get kind of back into the swing of things. 2 years ago, I thought by now we were really going to see the player that Curtis Jones is going to be shine through. Obviously, injuries haven't helped his cause at all, but I'm kind of hoping that this year at some point we're going to see an impressive run of 10 games from Curtis Jones where you're thinking, like, how are we going to get Curtis Jones on the pitch before the end of the season? Not right now. Of course, he won't be going to the World Cup, so there's going to be plenty of time to train and work on some things. I think he actually might be one of those really important players when we come back from the World Cup because obviously Henderson's going to go. Thiago may go. How much he'll play, I don't know. Same thing with Fabinho. But all these guys will have been away with their squads probably. And the guys that are left behind really have to step up and play a role, I think, in that first 2 weeks back from the World Cup. And who knows? I think Curtis Jones could be one of those guys.
I have a thing. I always had a thing for looking at players and coaching players and sort of a little bit for myself because I started off as an attacker as a young kid, and then as I got older, slowly got moved back to the left back for some reason. I had the left foot of a pirate with a wooden leg, but that's where I ended up. But Curtis Jones almost seems to me like the hustle and bustle of midfield might be a bit too physically tough, not tough, but difficult for him. Maybe we should be grooming him for Trent's support position. What do you think?
It's not the worst idea. Size wise, if I think about how much running Trent does, right? So what if the hustle and bustle is too much for him in midfield? Will he be able to do those long back and forth? I don't know. But I think that might be worth exploring because he's not a bad defender by any means. And we know he's a good passer. I don't know about his crossing, but if he can just pick apart the game from kind of a deeper position at right back, it's worth trying. I also think there might be a case to maybe it's as a wide player. If you were going to play 4-4-2, could he play in a wide area? Possibly. His pace isn't great, but it's also not terrible. He does have a really good touch. He does possess the ability to pass the ball. Maybe he can play at a number 10. At this point, I still feel like we don't know enough about Curtis Jones somehow, but would he work in another midfield that wasn't quite so much graft? Yeah, maybe.
For me, in terms of the physical thing, like once I see players getting a series of small niggly injuries, maybe one big one that keeps them stopping and starting, for me, that always, in my experience, always came from playing in positions where they have to twist and turn and change direction way too quickly, which is why I like those fullback positions for midfielders like that, because it's literally up the field, turn, back down the field, turn, up the field, turn, back down.
Yeah,
so it's really
a whole lot of spinning
Yeah,
in circles.
it's really a position for the James Milners of the world who have great aerobic capacity to get up and down the field all day, which I think Curtis Jones has. He never looks tired. He just gets injured. But I mean, just in terms of his overall game, he does seem like he's going to be an important player for us. You know, they just seem that there's a Liverpool player in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, there's another Scouser in the team, so I can't see him going anywhere unless he has like another really bad injury. He's still only 21, so he's got plenty of time left in his career. Still time to develop. If 3 years from now we're having the same conversation, that's different. But as of right now, I haven't lost my patience for Curtis Jones. I'm just wondering at what point, like how far out are we from realizing his potential? I think it might be another year yet, but this year will be important for him. We had seen the kind of growth that he made at the beginning of last season. I can remember that Brentford game when he scores the goal to make it 3-2. Of course, we end up drawing 3-3 at their place. But I thought he played well that whole game. And I thought we were kind of on a trajectory. He plays in the City game, right? At home to City. And at that point, it looked like, he's probably going to play all the time. Then he gets the injury, and it all starts this sort of chain of events. But if by the end of the season he's back where he was at that point, I think next year is sort of his breakout season.
I think if we could turn to our special guest, Brendan, what do you think Curtis Jones needs to do to step up to that next level?
You have to have character and intensity of pressing.
Like, that's pretty much it. That's all it boils down to, really, isn't it, David?
Good character.
Yeah, good character. Moving on, we have this coming up. Liverpool and Leeds, and
Late
this is a special.
Week, huh?
Yeah, I get a lie in for once. But particularly, I think I don't want to say poignant is the wrong word because that's a bit mawkish, but a particular apt game for American Scousers TV because, of course, the Leeds manager is Jesse Marsh, who's a dyed-in-the-wool American. How do you see this game? Let's talk about Leeds first and Jesse Marsh. How do you see him doing in the near future? Are we going to be another manager career killer this weekend?
I would really hope that they give him a little bit more time. His mouth doesn't move. It's sort of Steve Bruce-ish, you know. I would hope that they would give him more time. You know, he's only been there since middle of last season. So he's had at this point not even one whole campaign to work on this team. They're in the relegation zone right now.
Just right now, yeah.
Yeah. But they're gonna get a break during the World Cup. They can revamp some things. I think he's a really good coach. I've thought that since he was the New York Red Bulls coach. And then he did so well at Salzburg. And do you have another job? No, Salzburg. And I think given time, he'll do well here. Could we kill it this weekend? Possibly. But I think if you're Leeds, losing to Liverpool is that really unrealistic? given the form, where the team is at on its journey, were you expecting to beat Liverpool anyways?
Right? I think though, like a context for at least for us old farts is that Leeds Liverpool was always almost a second or third derby game. Going through the history, the 7 rivalry between Liverpool and Don Revie and Bill Shankly. And then in the 90s as well, like they won the last English league title and they kind of lorded it over us for a few years. But right now, it's not the classic Leeds team, obviously, and there is a bit of a gap between us and them. But for Jesse Marsh, the Bob Bradley experiment at Fulham, wasn't it? Didn't work out too well. Swansea, that's it, correct. Didn't work out too well. And being an American and with the whole Ted Lasso thing on Apple TV, it's kind of, we know that the English press can be very, very vicious when they want to be very, very vicious when they decided that the novelty of something is wore off. We talked about this in the morning coffee, I think this morning, me and Trevor. Basically, this is almost the first time that Jesse Marsh has felt any real pressure in his career, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly the greatest amount of pressure. I mean, I'm sure that pursuing a Austrian league title, he'll tell you that there was pressure with that. Of course there is, but this is a much different level, right? you're playing with the big boys now. This is and you're talking about relegation. You're not talking about what you're going to win. You're talking about survival. So it's a completely different situation. But I think he's the kind of guy that will thrive in this scenario. He's good at motivating. For them, if they go out and play well on Saturday and lose, say they put in a really good performance, but they lose 2-0. If you're the ownership, can you really fire him on the back of that? You know what I mean? Like, you've not even given him one full season as coach. He's still pretty young as coaches go. He's not, he's only, I think he's like 45 or something. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I can remember him playing in MLS. So if I was them, I would just say, whatever happens this weekend, you stick with it and reassess where you are come the World Cup. You may fire him come the World Cup and bring in a new manager who then has a month to train a team. That seems to be the more reasonable time frame to make a decision like that. You don't want to be, and now granted, you just saw that new manager bounce on Aston Villa, right? but it doesn't always work out that way. And what's the next guy set up for? If you fire Marsh right now, you might as well wait, see what happens over the next few weeks. They may turn a corner, lose this weekend, but win the next two, and then go into the break feeling they're not in the relegation zone and they're feeling pretty good. And then they've got a month to work on things. There's a case for that, just in the same way that there is for the new manager bounce idea. So if I was them, I would just stick with him for a little bit longer.
For me, as an immigrant and who earned his living at coaching over here, it seems to me, I always felt that for any perceived kind of lack of game intelligence, let's say, from American, like the standard grassroots American coach, the actual art of coaching is really prized in this country from the NFL, the NBA, and that other sport where they hit the ball with the bat that nobody watches because it's too boring. But American sports culture really values the methods and the input of coaches almost more than players sometimes. So in that sense, you kind of really want Jesse Marsh to succeed, don't you? Because you know that he's not doing anything. You mentioned Steve Bruce. You know he's not bringing them for fish and chips 2 hours before a game, and then having 10 points at half time or something. You know he's trying to do the modern things. Is it just the case that his methods aren't translating, or is it just that Bielsa burnt those players? And not to be bad on Bielsa, because I love Bielsa, but his methods really were physically intense to the extreme, like even beyond anything Klopp would ever do. Is it that those players are just so burned out that they don't have it in the tank anymore to compete?
That's possibly part of it. Yeah, I don't. They lose Calvin Phillips, and is Rafinha still there? He left too, right?
Yeah, I think he left too. Yeah.
So he's lost his two best guys. I think there's something. It's probably a combination of factors, right? So the methods, maybe they're not totally hitting home, but everybody, I'm sure, gets them and understands where he's coming from. It just may not be what they want to do necessarily, but all they got to, I think, if he could get them on board enough, just enough to get it started, then they get to January and you can buy a player, bring in an important character maybe. There's definitely a factor of this team was built thinking that they were going to be top 10-ish under Bielsa. That didn't work out. They're all kind of in a weird place. They've been there for a while. The folks that are left, not the one, some players moved on, as Rafinha went to Barca, Trevor pointed out. But for the guys that are left, how many guys on that team are you going in for if you're a top 8 club? I can't think of too many. Maybe the Harrison kid, Jack Harrison.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're, I mean, we wouldn't do it, but maybe somebody else would be. But I just think that they're lacking some talent. They got to be realistic about what they could achieve in the first place, right? And then understand that this coach hasn't had a whole lot of time to work with them. The players didn't really have an off season. There's a lot of factors at play here that are probably spelling trouble for Leeds. But it may not have that much to do with the manager or his tactics.
Speaking of tactics and flipping it over to our side of things, do you think we should maintain that shape and style of play that we just did against Ajax in the league, or do you think we have to have two sort of different game plans?
I think certainly against opponents like this, we should play that style. I really like where the places that Mo's getting the ball much better than where we started at the beginning of the season. Darwin as well is getting it in better positions, I think. So I want to see them continue to play in the style that we saw against Ajax. I don't want to go back to the standard 4-3-3. Now that said, he kind of goes back at times to the 4-3-3 against City, and we play great. So I think against certain teams it can work. It even worked at times against Arsenal, right? So there's possibilities there. Although we did some 4-4-2 against Arsenal as well. So I like the fact that he just has the ability. He's now showing the flexibility, the tactical sort of, let's see what happens if we do this. Let's use this on this opponent. Yesterday he even talked about it being more of a midfield diamond, right? Bobby coming back deep. Well, that was to play your opponent, and that was to make the most out of the players that you have on the field. That's all you can ask of a manager. The rest is up to the players, right? So if he puts them in a position to succeed, it's on them. I think if he does that again against Leeds, we're going to win comfortably.
Jordan Henderson hobbled off yesterday, but as me and Trevor talked about this morning, it just seemed more like one of those knee bangers where like two knees come in contact, and it's incredibly painful at the time, but you're over it 24 hours later. Do we risk Henderson knowing that we're probably going to need him, and he's probably going to get worked into the ground in the World Cup by Gareth Southgate, or do we plug somebody else in there, maybe Curtis Jones and give him a start, or maybe try Ox for a bit?
I'm hoping that the wax buildup in Thiago's ear is finally settled. I'm like, this must be one crazy ear infection. Hopefully Thiago is able to go on Saturday, and then I would go, Fabinho and Elliott, and just don't take the chance on Henderson. Just give him a rest. He can come off the bench, maybe. I think you're right. I think it's just a contact injury. He maybe got a bruise, but in a week he'll be fine. By the time we get to Napoli, which a lot of people are like, "Oh, we got to win that game," I don't think you do. To be honest, that's not. You may get lucky and draw Bruges in the round of 16 at this rate, I don't think it's like a huge priority next week. It's if we can, let's go out there and try to play well and try to win the game. But if they lose, it doesn't matter. We're already through. So I wouldn't risk Henderson this weekend, and I might not risk him there either. And then just bring him back in the following weekend game. That will ensure that he's getting his rest. Got time to recover if the knock is even semi-serious. Say it's a deep bruise. Let it heal. There's no point in pressing him at his age and with his injury history. I don't want to press him too hard, too often.
Who would you go with at left back? I mean, Robertson. I thought Robertson did really well yesterday. But Tsimikas, there really is competition at that left back spot, as we talked about before. Do we give Robertson the rest and put Tsimikas in, or do we try and keep Robertson going?
I think you want to get Robbo going. I'd like him to get a few more assists on the stat sheet, really get that confidence, have him fired up. So for him, I would like to start him this weekend and just see kind of if he can build on that last performance.
I think in terms of the back line, Kanate is back, at least in training. Do we stick with Gomez, because he is prone to a bit of a brain fart, but he has been doing quite well. But Kanate really is the better defender, isn't he, overall?
Yeah, and I think, really the kind of the future centerpiece of that back line. I'd like to see Konate come in and play alongside Van Dijk for this one and just help us boss the game, essentially. I think Trent is super comfortable with him backing him up. So, I'd probably bring Konate back and then go with Trent on the right-hand side.
What would your score prediction be for this game? I mean, because it could. We talked last week before the Forest game. Like, I mean, we were all confident, but that didn't work out, or not. Whatever the first game, it didn't work out, and it really has potential for a banana skin again with this one. But on paper, we really shouldn't be worrying overly about Leeds, should we?
No, on paper we shouldn't. We should win this game comfortably. But as we know, everybody saves their best shot for us. There's no such thing as a comfortable win in the Premier League for us, it seems. And their goalkeeper will stand on his head, do all kinds of crazy things to keep us out. So we'll see what happens. But you would think that this would be, I'm going to say 2-0.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. Yeah, I think 2-0 is probably a safe prediction. But it could be a lot more, or it could be a lot more dangerous for us.
Well, it is good having Alisson Becker in great form. So
yeah.
That helps.
Brendan, what do you think? How do you think we should?
You have to have character and intensity of pressing.
I mean,
he's right.
Come on, and you're dead right. You're manager of the year, son. So yeah, 2-0 from the lads, I think, and let's hope that doesn't come back to bite us in the ass like last week, for like the Forest game did. I've seen this line a lot, and it's been said, if only Messi able to just take cues from Pasveer. What's going to happen is he's going to get injured tomorrow, and they're going to put their sub goalkeeper in who's played 2 minutes in the last 10 years, and he's going to have the best game of his life. That is what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's probably true. Or they'll bring in some 41-year-old who.
Yeah, typical for us. Well, let's get on with it for the. You get to answer the threshold question this week all by yourself, David. Here's the threshold question. Would you rather have Van Dijk's athleticism and skills but the brain of Harry Maguire, or the athleticism and skills of Harry Maguire but the brain of Harry Maguire?
I'll have Virgil van Dijk's athleticism.
I mean, to be fair, you
did that. You need little amount of Harry Maguire as I could possibly get.
I think if you have at least Virgil van Dijk's athleticism, you'd be able to turn corners a lot quicker, rather. And to go back the way you came without falling over. So I think that's a wise choice. But yeah, that's it from us for this week. Next week, hopefully, we'll have Jamie back if he's had any sleep with the new Wayne, as they say in Scotland. Congratulations to him. Doing the good deed for the rest of us. And populating the land of Liverpool, making the Reds strong. And that all those kind of things you have to do. I mean, Brendan, do you have any hint, inspirations of what we have to do as men to repopulate Liverpool?
You have to have character and intensity of pressing.
Intensity of pressing is probably the biggest deal, really, isn't it? If you haven't got intensity of pressing, you're not going to be getting any kids soon, really, to be fair. Or a woman.
Do the good work, Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie,
I'll tell my mother to be proud of you.
My mother to be proud of you, because she certainly isn't proud of me. But that's it for ASTV for this week. We will be back with the full crowd hopefully next week. Just remains to say, like and subscribe. Hit those buttons. Watch us on YouTube tomorrow morning for the early morning coffee and the Monday night podcast. The Fantasy Football League is out, that show, if you are a Fantasy Football League player. And then we have all the other good stuff and the Discord channel and the Spotify as well. So you can hear us on Spotify as well. So make sure you're doing all of that, or we'll send Brendan around to repopulate your land. And you don't want that, because his pressing isn't quite intense. David, have a good one.
All right. Have a good one. Cheers, man.
We'll talk to everybody soon. Peace out.